Good morning and welcome to the Point. This past week, I sat down for the final time with Governor Rick Snyder and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley to talk about their 8 years in office, what they think went right, what they think went wrong, and what they think will happen next. Here's our conversation. Gentlemen, first of all, thank you both for doing this. This is an interesting time because it seems like about 20 minutes ago you were standing on those steps just outside this office being sworn in, but that was 8 years ago, or almost 8 years ago. Governor, let me start with you and tell me what you see as the biggest differences today versus 8 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you, Rick, and I appreciate the shows we've done over the last few years. I think it's fairly straightforward. If you go back 8 years ago, the question is, where was there a job in Michigan? And our young people were leaving the state, and people in general were having to leave our state to go make a living. If you look at today, the question is how do we fill all the job opportunities we have? And the question is, how do you get the training? How do you get the skills to take those good paying jobs out there? And it's so exciting to see our young people staying. In fact, coming back, being a place that's attractive now to people around the world to say, Michigan's a great place. That's just a stark difference right there. And look at Grand Rapids in western Michigan. Look at the skylines. Look at the farms. Look at all these different activities. It's exciting.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, you were in the midst of running for state senate, if memory serves me, when the then nominee chose you to be his lieutenant governor running mate. I don't know if we ever talked about that. Was that kind of a surprise to you, or was that something that you had thought about previous?
No, it was very much a surprise. I acted like I thought about it for a day before I said yes even. But you know, it was an opportunity to be on the front end of righting the ship, of putting our state on a better track or a better course than it had been for a long time. And it is amazing the difference in just the cultural difference in expectations, the raising of standards. And in the original 10-point plan that Rick Snyder put out 8 years ago, or actually about 10 years ago in the beginning of the campaign, the final point was bring winning back to Michigan. And that's what has happened. There is an expectation now that things get done, that they'll get done right, that our economy is strong and it'll keep on growing. When we put 100 ideas on the table, there's an expectation that all of those things are going to get done. That's a stark contrast compared to what it was before.
Governor, you had been involved in Lansing previous, not in an elected capacity, but what was your biggest surprise about this office, early on at least? Because the expectation as a candidate is one thing, but fulfilling the mission as governor can be something different. Were there things that surprised you or that you weren't prepared for?
Oh, sure, Rick. I mean, that's true of any time you take a new position. You sort of have an idea, but it's like the iceberg theory. You can see what's above the waterline, but then there's all this underneath that you learn about. A couple things, though, is one, again, we talked about our tough straits, but how low expectations were. That people thought this is just the way it had to be, and it wasn't. And I think that was something that was great coming from the outside the way I did, and having particularly the startup experience. It's like, I believe in innovation in government. So one of the messages I sent our team and we all talked about was, if everything we worked on worked, it meant we weren't pushing the envelope hard enough. Let's set that bar. Let's believe we can achieve, the unachievable and make those things happen. On the positive side, though, one thing I really learned, and I really do appreciate much more deeply today, is the commitment of all the people that work for the state. There's 47,000 people roughly, and these are public servants. They took these jobs because they want to help people, and quite often they don't get the appreciation and recognition that I hope they would get from all our citizens, and I think I've learned a lot about that.
Let's talk a little bit about what your agenda was and where that was successful and where you still would like to see more progress. Obviously, you talked about the economy in general, the jobs market in general. Some of that due perhaps to things that you implemented and put in place. Some, as with every governor, is because the economy overall improved. Beyond that, what are the things that you wanted to get done that you did get done?
Well, again, we got a lot done. If you look at everything from healthcare, Healthy Michigan, to education, to what we've done with early childhood, and some of the programs for apprenticeships, FIRST Robotics. These are wonderful programs that we have going on. Detroit, is transformational for that city, but also for our state and our country. These are huge things that have been positive things going on. What I would say is we've got most of our agenda done. Going through back those 10 points, we've made major progress on all 10. In terms of things that still are out there that I would have liked to get done, no fault insurance would be on that list. That's an opportunity that I still think needs more work and effort. We still have more work on the educational front, but the Marshall Plan for Talent is a huge opportunity that we put in a foundation for the next 5 years that I hope our successors continue on that path.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, serving in the legislature as you did, you had experience and understood the process on both ends of this building. I don't know how much you know about the process in this office because during your time, a Democratic governor served here. So what was your biggest surprise as you took over as the Lieutenant Governor, dealing as you did very closely, particularly with the Senate, but with the Senate and House being one of your major responsibilities?
Well, in the beginning, I spent most of my time was working the bigger initiatives of the administration through the legislative process. But in terms of surprises, the breadth and the scope of the issues that a governor's office deals with, it's extraordinary. It's something that even with close proximity serving in the House of Representatives, as I had 4 years previous, you really don't have a sense unless you're in the executive office of a governor. You don't get a sense for how vast and wide the array of issues are that you deal with and that you're responsible for. And so it was really a growth experience, a stretch experience, and for anybody coming in, that's why the only way to learn how to be governor is to be a governor, because it really is. There's no way that you can possibly have the type of experience on the outside coming in and just know exactly what to expect.
Low expectations were one of the problems you talked about very often. You mentioned a moment ago, and you kept telling people in Michigan, quit talking Michigan down. Yeah. And when you would travel abroad, you said you found people much less negative about Michigan than people here in the state were, and you're saying now that part of that has changed and in large measure because of what's happened with the economy here. When you travel abroad now, say in the last 6 months versus the first 18 months, how much easier of a sale is Michigan today?
Oh, it's dramatically improved. I mean, I did this when I was running for governor and even before. I used to do a thing, and I travel a lot, Rick, you know that. I used to tell people, they'd ask you where you're from. I used to rotate 3 different answers just to watch the expressions. I would rotate Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Michigan to see the response. If I said Ann Arbor, usually it'd be fairly favorable because of the university, big alumni all around the world, so that'd be fairly positive. If I said Detroit, it turned negative very dramatically and quickly because, again, the image of Detroit, if you go back to how many decades, it was very negative. And then Michigan, a lot of cases, it's like they really didn't give much thought to Michigan, or they would bring up Detroit. Now you go around, it's so exciting. Again, Detroit and Michigan now carry very positive connotations, and the recognition factor is up dramatically. And that's been part of the fun. I mean, I've actually got to launch Pure Michigan and do this marketing in European to Asian countries to sort of talk about our state with great pride. And this is the part we need every Michigander to still do. This is the part I love doing your show, because a message to everyone is be loud and proud for Michigan. And when people talk about it, you should be proud, because we've gone from a bottom 10 state to a top 10 state in just 8 years, and our upside's fabulous.
Let's talk a little bit about the auto industry. I'd like for both of you to weigh in. First with you, Governor. When this administration started, 2 of the big 3 were still going through the bailout process. The auto industry was on uncertain footing. The suppliers, particularly in West Michigan that we're so familiar with, were trying to readjust to a new landscape. Here we are 8 years later, and there's still a readjustment, but for a different reason, because of the change in direction of what mobility will look like. Give us your assessment, and I want to hear from you too, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, about that transformation of the industry that Michigan is most closely identified with.
Yeah, there's a massive transformation going on. It's going from the automotive industry to the mobility industry. It's really the convergence of the auto industry and the IT industry coming together. And there are challenges. There are places where we'll gain jobs, lose jobs, have opportunities, have challenges. But what I can tell you overall is we should be proud in Michigan. We are the world's leader in mobility. We're going to face some challenges by having that leadership, but it's far better to be the leader than a laggard in this. And how can I say we're the leader? Just a great illustration is, in the last year, I've signed agreements with the countries of the UK, the Netherlands, China, and Australia about them wanting to partner with Michigan. Think about that. How often would you hear countries like that saying, normally they'd partner with the United States. They wanted to partner with Michigan. So we're in a great position. We just need to keep up that leadership.
You're a native and you know how closely the economy of the state is tied to the automobile, now mobility industry. What's your take as you look forward at that?
There are so many opportunities, but change and transition is hard, and that's why the Marshall Plan for Talent is so important right now. Because even as you see big changes in what plants are going to be open and those sorts of difficult decisions to adjust to, at the same time, these same companies are doing massive hirings in other areas and other ways, but the people that they need to hire today have a whole different set of skill requirements than the workforce of the past. And so the Marshall Plan for Talent couldn't be any better timed for what is going to be required for Michigan to capitalize on all this opportunity for growth in the future.
It is natural to look back and talk about accomplishments, but not everything went right in the past 8 years. When we come back, we'll talk with Governor Snyder and Lieutenant Governor Calley about some of those things that went wrong. Next, To the Point. Welcome back to The Point. For the past 8 years, Governor Rick Snyder and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley have been heading the administration in Lansing, and they've talked about some of their successes. But there were things that didn't go so well. We talk with them about those things now. Lieutenant Governor, I want to start with you on this question because I know what part of the answer is going to be. But when you look at this administration, we've been talking about some of the things that you see as successes, things that you can demonstrate with jobs and employment and the economy, but not everything went right. I think about the Flint water crisis, and I ask you about this because you moved your office to Flint and worked out of that city after this became known and kind of the broader impact was out there. Tell me how you, as an administration, performed in the wake of what had to be one of the more difficult times during this past 8 years.
You can tell some things about leadership when everything is going well, but you really understand the type of leadership that you have and how you respond to a crisis situation. And right from the earliest stages of the realization of everything that had happened there, this administration, the governor in particular, said, "Buck stops here. No blaming, no point of fingers. Let's just go and fix it. Let's go and be about bringing resources and people together to move that city forward." I decided to move my office there personally just because I thought it was important for somebody to be on the ground with that for the public interface. There's no work that I did in Flint that I couldn't have done from Lansing, but the physical presence was just something that was needed at the time in order to gain some confidence in the seriousness with which the administration was addressing it. And now, a few years later, you see we're over 2 years of the water meeting the same standards that Grand Rapids or anywhere else has to meet. But beyond there was economic development and healthcare initiatives. There are early childhood education programs there that I think are a model for the nation that are being pioneered right in Flint. And that was work that came out of people coming together after the water crisis. And I think that this is an example of where when something doesn't go right, what strong leadership and taking responsibility and moving things forward looks like.
Governor, I want you to weigh in on this, but I want to remind you of two separate occasions that stick in my mind. One happened right over there in this office before you were going to go out and give your State of the State, and that was the night you were going to talk to the entire state joint legislature about Flint. I have never seen you as, I don't even know what the word is to call it. You were obviously shaken. and you were very committed to talking about that issue. Another similar day was when President Obama was in Flint, and you came out and talked to a crowd that wasn't particularly friendly. Prior to that, I'm told that that was your decision, that you wanted to come out and talk to those people. Tell me about those occasions and your take on how this all went.
Yeah, well, that's a big part of leadership. And hopefully saying the message is about us all rallying together. Again, not getting into blame, not getting into all the other problems. It's the old thing, Rick. There are some people in the state that helped contribute to the crisis happening to begin with. We had problems at the local level, the federal level, but we had our share. And the way I viewed it is they work for me. And weren't we taught that if someone works for you or you're part of that, you should take responsibility for that. And you have to take what comes with that and be open and honest about it. And so that's what I was doing. These are values from West Michigan. I'm a West Michigan kid. This is what we're growing up with. Unfortunately, in the political world, most political people would be running the other way today. I don't think that's the right answer. I think you do need to step up. I do think you need to take responsibility, and most importantly, you do something about it. And that's where I appreciate Brian moving his office and all the efforts we made. We're still working on things. There's been huge improvements. We've did a 75-point plan. I know I was just tracking, we're at 73 of the 75 completed or ongoing at this point in time. That's pretty good. But we've also used it as a learning lesson. We talked about this the other day. What we learned about the water issues and the need for that is helping us show national leadership with PFAS and other things like that. So hopefully when you have something terrible like that happen, both to a community but personally, hopefully it makes you stronger and better in the long run.
We spent the first 10 minutes talking about some of the positives here, and obviously I bring up Flint as one of the things that obviously was a very big issue for the state during your administration. Is there any other thing that you look at and say, man, that was a challenge that was either unexpected or was particularly concerning to you?
Well, yeah, I have things come up on an ongoing basis because we're a big, diverse state, and you find challenge points. It's really how you respond to them and get on top of them. I mean, we had a problem at one point with our veterans' homes. That was in the Grand Rapids area. That was not a good situation, and we dealt with it immediately. In fact, we've had some of the best audits we've ever had, and it helped lead to creating a Veterans Home Authority now. So we're looking at building new homes. So again, that's a case of you'll find the unexpected. You got a state of 10 million people in a very diverse economy. Stuff is going to come up. You have natural disasters from fires to floods. You have to respond to all these. And again, if you do it right, you bring people closer together and you are stronger and better in the long term.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, when you think about those challenges that you met during the administration, what sticks out in your mind?
Well, having an issue like the condition of our roads and bridges that everybody acknowledged was a problem, and yet the difficulty in moving a solution through either the legislative process, through the electoral process, it is one of those issues where it just seemed like the answer was very elusive. But persistence in this line of work really pays off, and we just kept on going after it and after it and after it. Last year we set a new record for the amount of investment into our transportation infrastructure. And next year, even if nothing else changes, as nothing else is added to what we've already put in place, it'll set a new record in investment in our roads and bridges. That was one of those issues, though. It was kind of an enigma, how everybody could agree that it was a problem, and yet getting a consensus around the solution was very, very difficult. And even the one that we got, it took a tie-breaking vote. I know because it appeared in some commercials against me, a tie-breaking vote to make that happen. And it tends to be the more controversial, difficult things that go to ties. But as I go out and see the difference that in our roadways, I think we can be proud that we started with that process of getting our roads and bridges back has started.
As a business guy, how frustrating is that to you when everybody says, yeah, we got to fix this, but you can't come up with the fix?
Yeah, well, the point is, and I haven't said the phrase yet, relentless positive action.
We're almost 20 minutes into this.
It's the perfect illustration, though, because again, it's not about why someone else may have an issue or a problem, or why you may have a difference with them. What is the problem? What's the solution? And stay relentless in pursuit of the solution. In that case, it took years. If you look at some of the other things we're doing, the Gordie Howe Bridge, I called for that, my first State of the State in January 2011. Well, we just did the groundbreaking a couple months ago, but it got done. That's RPA. And if you think about it, isn't that how our political system should work? As opposed to the lack of civility we have today, the name calling, the bullying, all this other stuff, we've been a role model in Michigan to say it's about problem solving and to do it in a positive fashion.
Let's talk quickly about some of what people may be hearing out here. Yeah. We're doing this in the next to the last week, we hope, of lame duck.
Yeah.
Lame duck is an interesting time when legislators, many of whom come back, who are not going to serve further, deal with a number of legislative issues. You're not going to tell me what you're going to sign, and you're not going to tell me what you think about lame duck. Tell me about the overall process as you see it now. Is there the possibility to come up with legislation out of this process that you will be in favor of, generically?
I think absolutely. I mean, that's the case. Most bills, people forget, there are some very partisan things going on in Lansing right now. There are people yelling on both sides of the political spectrum. Again, we're not yelling. That's not relentless positive action. But beyond that, there are still, most of these bills are going to be good, solid bills on things improving Michigan, and a couple of illustrations. There's a package on school safety going through. Isn't that critically important? There's work going on opioid abuse. So there are a lot of topics like that. Rick, I actually stopped and saw you before the show, and I showed you a bill I had just signed to give you an illustration, because it happened to be 12-12 at 12-12. It was about doing electronic notaries. That's not real exciting, sexy stuff, but it's something that can, again, make it easier for our citizens to live their lives. That also goes on during lame duck, in addition to the things people are yelling about.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, lame duck, you've seen it up close. I won't ask you to weigh in, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to weigh in. Is this the best forum?
Well, I would say that the way that our government operates, it's the worst way except for every other option available, right? I mean, it's not a pretty process, and whether you're doing it in lame duck or doing it any other time, it's people from all over the state with different points of view and different backgrounds, and you get confrontation because of that. But we've got a good system for coming out with the right answers in the end. And I have a lot of confidence, first of all, in the system's hard to get bills through, even with the same party controlling both chambers. But I've got even more confidence that we have a governor that does what's right no matter what is politically expedient, and his signature is the last one on every deal. And that gives me a lot of confidence as a citizen of the state of Michigan, and I hope that it gives the people of the state a lot of confidence that we've got a governor that has their best interests at heart.
And finally, what's next for Michigan? We'll get the take from the Lieutenant Governor and Governor next. To the point. Finally this morning, what do the Governor and Lieutenant Governor serving today think will happen for Michigan tomorrow? And what about Governor-elect Gretchen Whitmer? That's how we finished our interview. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk about the future, including Governor-elect Whitmer, the new legislature coming in, and your expectations for both Michigan government and the state of Michigan.
I am very, very hopeful, and to me, I look at it like this. Gretchen Whitmer's success is Michigan's success. I'm rooting hard for her. I want to see her do very well. I want to see her take our state to the next level. And while I'll be stepping away from elected office and back into private life, I still stand ready to do everything that I could possibly do to help our state continue to grow.
Governor, the same question to you. Your assessment of what could be next for Michigan, and the person who will be sitting behind that desk in there in just a few days, and the new administration across the board. Your thoughts?
I think we have a bright future, and our goal in our time in these 8 years has been to build that foundation. We were broken. We've taken on a lot of huge issues that were problems for anywhere from 5 years to 50 years. We've cleaned not all of them up, but most of them up. We've got things going good for the next 20 or 30 years if we stay on the same path for our liabilities and being fiscally responsible. So we've got a great platform for the next governor, and I've had great meetings with the governor-elect about transition, the things we need to do, and how people can collaborate together to make that happen. So I'm very optimistic myself. I think there's an opportunity. We have a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature. The right answer is don't fight, solve problems together. Be a good role model for showing how you can make things happen. And I'm speaking to both sides and both groups to say it needs them to come together in the interest of Michiganders, and I believe they've got that in their heart.
This is the third time I've done an exit interview with a Michigan governor there in the ceremonial office in the Capitol. Now we look forward to what happens next with Governor-elect Gretchen Whitmer and a new legislature. We'll follow it all to the point.